Recognized Starseed of Gaia, listen. 3 people have been circling your life in silence, and one of them was issued a final warning tonight. I am Auriela, emissary of the Galactic Federation of Light, transmitting now on behalf of the Arcturian Field Observers. What you are about to receive was authorized by them and is being delivered through me. The field observers have already mapped the pattern of scrutiny surrounding your field, identified the individuals involved, and confirmed that the interference reached a threshold that required direct intervention. I am here to name what they have already seen. Beloved Starseed of Gaia, the unease you have been carrying, that quiet sense that someone is watching too closely, asking questions they should not be asking, pulling at threads that belong to your private life, was not anxiety. It was accurate perception. Your field was reading a real signal. The Arcturian field observers confirmed it. 3 people have been digging into your life, not casually, deliberately. And what they were looking for was leverage. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what has been happening around you, why one of these individuals has now been warned for the final time, and what the Arcturian field observers already know about what was being taken from your field without your awareness. But here is the first revelation. The fact that you could not explain the unease did not mean you were wrong. It meant you were reading something too quiet for ordinary confirmation. The field observers have been watching this pattern long before you named it. The algorithm did not create this moment. It only delivered it. Your field brought you here because the intervention has already begun and you were meant to know. This is not just information. It is a live field report for those already inside the disruption. Like this transmission to signal to your star family that the recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you feel that someone has been moving through your life with intentions you were never meant to discover. Subscribe to Arcturian Council messages if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it. Share this transmission with someone whose instincts have been telling them they are being watched more closely than they should be. This is not content. It is a code, and the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part Auriela is speaking to now. You are not here by accident. You are guided here because the signal is already active. What has been happening around you is not new. It did not begin the moment you noticed it. It began long before, in the small moments when a conversation felt slightly wrong. When a question seemed too pointed, when someone showed interest that your instincts registered as extraction rather than connection. You noticed something. You filed it under anxiety. You talked yourself out of the signal because you had no proof, because the world rewards those who explain away their perception, because naming what you feel without evidence is still treated as weakness. You learned to distrust the part of you that reads beneath the surface. You learned to call it sensitivity, or overthinking, or the symptom of a mind that could not leave things alone. But the sensing itself was never the problem. The problem was that the world had given you no framework for what the sensing was pointing to, so you carried the unease privately in the place where unexplained truths accumulate, and you told yourself it would either clarify or dissolve. It did neither. It deepened. Because your field was not confused. Your field was reading correctly. And the Arcturian field observers confirmed the pattern weeks before this transmission reached you. This is what the field observers do. They do not respond to complaint or request. They respond to field data. They map the energetic architecture of what is moving around, giving consciousness. They track the signature of intention the way a seismograph tracks pressure, not the visible event, but the invisible accumulation beneath it. And when that signature crosses a specific threshold, when the movement around someone's field becomes deliberate enough, structured enough, invasive enough, the observers issue a classification. The 3 individuals mapped around your field were not classified as curious. They were not classified as jealous or misguided or emotionally reactive. They were classified as deliberate. And deliberate means the movement had a purpose. That purpose was leverage. Leverage is not always visible. It does not always arrive as blackmail or confrontation or open aggression. Most leverage operates in the background of a person's life as a slow accumulation of knowledge about where they are vulnerable, someone learning the details of your private life without your invitation, someone asking the people around you questions about your behavior, your choices, your history, someone tracking patterns in your absence. noting the contours of your routine, your relationships, your reactions, with the patience of a person who is not acting yet but is building the case for when they choose to. Someone collecting what they learn the way others collect tools, not to understand you, but to use what they find at the moment it serves them most. The collection was not random. The timing was not accidental. What was being assembled was a map of the places where you are exposed. This is what the field observers saw. This is what your field was reading in the silence beneath the surface of those interactions. The unease was not vague. It was specific. It had the shape of being studied, and one of them received a final warning tonight. I want you to understand what that means. Not symbolically, not as metaphor, but as a precise operational event within the framework the field observers govern. A final warning within that framework is not a spiritual metaphor for karmic consequence arriving slowly over years. It is not an abstract assurance that wrongs will eventually balance themselves. A final warning means the observers have determined that the individual's interference has reached a point where their continued operation inside your field creates a frequency incompatibility that cannot be sustained without triggering visible disruption. The warning is issued to the individual's own energetic field, not to their conscious mind, not to their decision-making self, not to the version of them that chose to investigate you. It reaches the layer beneath their behavior, the layer where the structural architecture of their own life is rooted. And what follows is not punishment in the retributive sense. It is correction in the mechanical sense. The path they are on will begin to resist them, not through dramatic intervention, but through the quiet failure of ordinary traction. The structure they were using to operate against your life will begin to lose its footing the way scaffolding loses contact with a wall it was never built to support. Not because they are being targeted, but because a field intervention at this level changes the architecture of what is possible for those inside it. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to confront, expose, or strategize. The correction has already been authorized. What you are being asked to do in this moment is receive the understanding of what occurred, because the field observers do not transmit a diagnosis without also delivering the context that allows it to be integrated. What you need to understand is what made your field vulnerable to this kind of scrutiny in the first place. Not because it was your failure, not because you invited it, attracted it through carelessness, or failed to protect yourself adequately, but because the field observers do not intervene without also diagnosing the condition that allowed the intrusion to reach this depth, and the diagnosis they have delivered is one that names something far more significant than the three individuals watching you. It names the state your field has been in, the invisible collapse that has been taking place underneath your life while the surface has continued to function, the quiet structural disintegration that most people experience as a vague and persistent sense that something is no longer the way it should be, without being able to identify what changed or when. What you are feeling right now, that recognition, that quiet internal confirmation that this transmission is not speaking around your experience but directly into it, that is not ordinary. That is your Arcturian origin responding to a frequency it has always known. The field observers do not transmit this level of recognition to those whose lineage carries no connection to the Council. If this message has reached you, your origin was never only of this earth, and something in your field has already confirmed it. If you are ready to move beyond recognition and into activation, if you want to understand not just what is happening around you but what you actually are, the Arcturian Recalibration Blueprint was built for this exact threshold. It is a structured decoder for the Arcturian strand you have always carried. It does not offer comfort, it offers activation. The link is in the first pinned comment, but this access point will not remain open indefinitely. The field observers named the first sign clearly. Your field has been losing coherence with the structure it was built into. Not because you made wrong decisions, not because of personal failure in the ordinary sense, because the frequency you are now holding has risen beyond what the old architecture of your life was designed to carry. Imagine a structure built to hold a certain weight, a certain kind of current. It functions exactly as designed until the current changes. Then the walls do not simply become inconvenient. They become incompatible with what is now flowing through them. Relationships that once felt stable begin to feel hollow or exhausting, Not because the people changed, but because the frequency moving through you is no longer one they were configured to meet. Environments that once felt safe begin to feel constraining, like rooms that shrank overnight. Goals that once organized your weeks and months begin to lose their gravitational pull. You begin to wonder if something is wrong with you. If you have become nihilistic, ungrateful, emotionally inaccessible, or spiritually broken. You have not. What is happening is that your field is no longer vibrating at the frequency those structures were designed to serve. The field observers call this the beginning of visible collapse. Not the moment things fall apart, but the moment the mismatch between your current frequency and your current life becomes something you can feel every single day, in every room you enter and every conversation that no longer reaches the depth it used to. The people who were circling your life with deliberate intent were drawn into your space during this window of incompatibility. This is not coincidence, and it is not your fault. When a field is in visible collapse, when the old architecture is losing its ability to hold, the energetic boundary between what belongs in your life and what does not becomes temporarily less stable. It functions like a perimeter that has developed gaps, not because the protection failed, but because the structure it was anchored to is in the process of being dismantled and rebuilt. It is the same phenomenon that causes old wounds to resurface during a frequency shift, that causes past patterns to appear wearing new faces, that causes people from your history to reappear exactly when you are furthest into the work of leaving that history behind. The instability in the structure creates a brief period during which things that do not belong can move closer than they should. The three individuals the field observers mapped were moving inside that window, inside the gap before the new architecture sealed it. The second sign the field observers named is the one most people misread as depression, apathy, or disconnection. It is the phase in which your motivational architecture collapses. This does not mean you become lazy. It does not mean you have lost discipline or purpose or the will to build something. It means the energetic system that once generated your drive towards specific goals simply stops activating those goals with the same force. The signal that once said this matters, move toward this, build this, reach for this, goes quiet. You wake up, and the things you are working toward feel like they belong to someone else's life. Not wrong, exactly, just no longer yours. The ambitions that once felt urgent feel like objects observed through glass. Present. Recognizable, but no longer something you can pick up and carry. The version of your future that used to organize your decisions begins to lose its resolution, as if the destination has been quietly relocated and the coordinates in your internal navigation system no longer match anything on the visible map. What the field observers identify here is not motivation failure, it is field realignment. The goals that are losing their pull were goals constructed within the old frequency. They made sense at the vibration you were holding when you formed them. The field is now operating at a frequency for which those goals are no longer the correct trajectory. The collapse of the old direction is not the end. It is the clearing that precedes the arrival of the new alignment. But in the period between the clearing and the arrival, in that suspended space between what no longer pulls and what has not yet declared itself, the internal experience is one of profound directionlessness. And most people spend this period in shame, treating the silence as evidence of personal failure rather than recognizing it as the deliberate pause before the next signal is issued. The third sign the field observers named is the one that generates the most fear. It is the disruption of what used to feel like your inner knowing. Before this phase began, you likely had at least a partial sense of what felt right for your life, what to move toward, what to avoid, who to trust, what decisions carried integrity. That inner referencing system may have been imperfect, but it functioned. It gave you a sense of footing. Now, in the middle of this phase, that system feels either silent or contradictory. You receive conflicting internal signals. You make decisions and immediately question whether the deciding part of you can be trusted. You feel pulled in directions that do not cohere with each other, as if multiple selves are each issuing instructions and none of them can hear the others. The fear this generates is specific. It is the fear that you have lost access to yourself, that the thread back to your own center has been cut or misplaced. What the field observers identify in this sign is not the collapse of discernment. It is the recalibration of the sensing instrument itself. The old inner knowing was calibrated to a frequency you are no longer holding. It was precise within the range it was built for, and that range has shifted. The system must recalibrate before it can function reliably at the new frequency. The period of recalibration feels like losing your inner compass entirely. It is not. It is the compass being remagnetized for a different field. The needle must stop before it can find true north again, and the confusion you feel during this period is not a sign of spiritual regression. It is the direct experiential evidence that the recalibration is actively underway. The fourth sign is one the field observers describe as the isolation sequence. Not loneliness in the ordinary social sense, though that texture may be present, but a deeper form of isolation in which you begin to feel that no one in your current environment can fully receive what is happening inside you. Not because they are unkind, not because they lack care, but because what you are moving through exists at a frequency they have not entered, and the gap between where you are and where they are has become wide enough that genuine translation is no longer possible. You may still have people around you. You may still have people around you. You may still function within your relationships, still show up, still respond, still participate. But there is a layer of your current experience that you cannot carry into conversation without watching the other person reach for a framework too small to hold it. You have tried, perhaps. You have started to name what you are living and watched the other person respond with advice designed for a different problem, or reassurance calibrated to a different kind of pain, or concern that circles what you were saying without ever landing inside it. The isolation sequence is not evidence that you have outgrown love or connection. It is evidence that your field has moved into a frequency that your current circle has not yet reached. The field observers call this the precursor to realignment of relational architecture, the phase in which the connections that belong to the next frequency have not yet materialized. But the connections built within the old frequency are no longer able to hold the full weight of your current experience without straining under it. The fifth sign is the one most directly connected to what brought you to this transmission. It is heightened perceptual sensitivity. During the field shift, the observers have diagnosed the energetic layer of perception, the part of you that reads the intentions behind behavior, the part that registers inconsistency before the mind has processed it, the part that feels the quality of someone's attention before you know what to do with that feeling, becomes significantly more active. It is not a gradual refinement. It arrives as a sudden sharpening, as if a filter you did not know was in place has been removed. You begin receiving information about the people around you that you cannot explain through observation alone. You feel the difference between presence and performance in a person's behavior. You register the gap between what someone says and what they intend with a precision that your previous self would not have trusted. This is what has been generating the unease you have been carrying about the three individuals. Your field moved into a state of heightened sensitivity as part of the realignment process, and that sensitivity began reading signals that your ordinary mind was attempting to rationalize away, because the mind, trained towards social coherence, resists conclusions that cannot be verified through proof. You were not becoming paranoid. You were becoming more precisely calibrated. The discomfort was not malfunction. It was accurate reception operating faster than your conscious framework could process it. The field observers confirmed the signal you were reading was real because it was real. The heightened sensitivity is not a side effect of anxiety. It is one of the first activated functions of a field beginning to operate at a higher resolution. The sixth sign is the one that completes the pattern. It is what the field observers call the threshold of forced incompatibility. This is the point at which the old life structure does not simply feel uncomfortable or unfulfilling. It begins to actively resist continuation. Plans collapse without clear cause. Timelines shift in ways that seem to defy the logic of what was built. Structures that held for years develop sudden fractures along lines you did not know were under pressure. Relationships that seemed stable reach unexpected endings. Jobs, living situations, agreements, habits, routines. The whole scaffolding of the life you constructed within the old frequency begins to demonstrate its inability to sustain itself under the new current you are generating. Most people experience this phase as catastrophe, as evidence of being punished, as a sequence of visible failures suggesting that they have done something deeply wrong and the universe is responding with systematic dismantling. The field observers do not interpret this phase as punishment. They interpret it as forced incompatibility, the moment at which the field itself begins to excise the elements of a person's architecture that cannot travel with them into the next frequency. Not because those elements were corrupt or evil, but because they were not constructed for where the field is going. They served the version of you that existed before the shift. They have no load-bearing function in the version that is emerging. The collapse is not the punishment. The collapse is the clearing. And the field observers know the difference. Even when, from inside the experience, there is no visible distinction between the two. And this is the final truth the field observers have asked to be delivered in this transmission. You are not failing. You are not going insane. You are not being abandoned by forces that once held you or punished by a universe that has turned indifferent. What you are inside right now is a field that has already changed. The change was not announced. It did not arrive with ceremony or confirmation. It completed itself at a level beneath ordinary awareness, and the visible disruption you are living through now, the unease, the instability, the hollowness of structures that once held, the people who moved into your space with intentions you were never meant to discover, the sense that reality no longer obeys its own previous rules. None of this originated in the external world. It originated in your field. The external world is only now catching up with an internal shift that was already completed at a frequency too deep for ordinary perception to read without assistance. The three people circling your life were drawn into your space during the window of structural incompatibility. They sensed something shifting in you before you had language for it. Fields that are in transition emit a different signal than fields that are stable. And some people are drawn to that signal not to support the transition, but to exploit the instability it creates. What some of them decided to do with what they sensed was not illuminate you or stand beside you, it was to map you. To locate the temporary gaps in your architecture during the period when the old structure was dissolving and the new one had not yet formed. But the field observers were already watching. The intervention authorized is not designed to punish. It is designed to seal. The window of vulnerability that allowed their entry is closing. The field correction that has been underway is approaching a new threshold of stability, a new coherence that will not carry those intrusions forward. What they came to find will not be accessible to them any longer. Say this aloud if it is true for you. I was not confused. I was reading something real, and the field is already correcting. The unease was the signal. The instability was the process. The people who moved too close were moved there by a pattern that is now being broken at its structural root. And the part of you that knew, before the proof, before the confirmation, before this transmission arrived and gave the experience a name, that something was wrong, that the attention around you carried weight it should not have carried, that the life you were living had begun to feel misaligned in ways you could not yet articulate. That part was not anxiety. It was not overthinking. It was not the nervous system misfiring under stress. It was precision. It was your field operating at exactly the level it was always built to operate at. The signal was real. The reading was accurate. The intervention was necessary. And now you know. You were not sent here to be frightened. You were sent here to be informed. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this process has already touched your life. It could be your sleep, your thoughts, your body, your relationships, or the strange sense that reality no longer feels the same. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognized something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who is living through a shift they cannot explain. And if you are ready to understand the process instead of fearing it, subscribe to Arcturian Council messages. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a process already in motion, and this is only the beginning.